Welcome back to Thoughts of Ascendance of a Bookworm. Today we are looking at episode 7, Seeds of Suspicion. I first briefly want to talk about the recap for this episode. It tells us that on her paper-making journey, she has failed to account for one major problem: death. I just found it funny because, what is Mind supposed to do about that? The episode properly begins by Lutz showing the same wonder towards the north of the city as Mind did last time. But Lutz has his priorities in check, looking forward to the food they will have with Benno. We then get a brief flashback to when Otto handed them the invitation, and Mine asks for directions. It is now that we find out Benno is Karina's brother, and therefore Otto's brother-in-law, because the Gilberta Company is the same place as Otto's home. I don't understand Mine saying they got us slow, because it really isn't very important. Mine then warns Lutz to be careful not to be tricked, showing her foresight that this won't just be a lunch, but a meeting. Lutz expresses his confusion, and with Mine ignoring him, it turns into worry. There are actually quite a lot of times in the show when Lutz tries to talk to Mine, and she just completely ignores him. She could really try and communicate better. We now get our first look at the Gilberta Company, and we immediately see the staff greeting customers and being very professional. We also see some merchandise, which includes what looks to be lipstick, and like I said last episode, this store specialises in clothing and beauty products, so that's not surprising. Mine assures Lutz that they do likely make money, and I mean, have you not seen the building and the number of staff? They're definitely making money. It's impressive that Mine is able to assess their clientele just from looking at the store from outside. It hints at how business-minded she is. With the bell ringing low, we move to lunch with Benno. At lunch, we get a scan of the food, and we see some bread, some soup, some sort of salad, maybe some potato and or meat, along with a drink. And honestly, it doesn't look any better than the meal Mine made at the start of episode 4. In fact, it looks worse. But I suppose that's what Mine complains about herself. Now, with Benno apologising for the short notice, they start eating. You can tell Lutz is less acquainted with table manners, because he was staring at the food the entire time whilst Benno was talking, and then immediately shoves food in his mouth once Benno says they may start. He isn't completely lost though. He does wait until Benno gives them permission to eat, and he does use cutlery. Other than silently complaining about the meal, Mine eats with dignity. She then looks at Benno's face and wonders if he is mad. I would argue that that's just Benno's resting face, but I suppose he is also mad, so yeah. With lunch consumed, business discussions take place over tea. We can see Mine brace herself, but she looks shocked when Benno asks why she went to Otto. Benno then reveals it's about the nails and the trade for the simple all-in-one shampoo. He clearly showed an interest in it last time, so I'm not shocked he is unhappy about Otto getting some before him. The discussion then turns to the issue of them not going to him first. Mine and Lutz then share their perspective, that since they've only been conditionally accepted, they didn't think they had to go straight to Benno. Benno then explains that since he has agreed to buy the paper, and that he will take them both on as apprentices and sell the paper should they do well, then they go to him about everything. This makes sense to me, as it would be bad if another business were able to get some sort of stake in the paper-making business because of deals Mine made without Benno knowing. With Mine now understanding what she did wrong, she bows her head in apology. But much like the shopkeeper in episode 1, Benno is confused by her behaviour. Again, we have some cultural dissonance from Mine, with eye contact being the norm in this world, but Mine reverts to the Japanese norm of bowing. It shows us that whilst she has grown largely accustomed to this world, she still retains characteristics from our world. The fact that she immediately realises her mistake tells me that it was done out of instinct or muscle memory too, further showing how her past life is just embedded into her. Problems out of the way, the real business talk starts, and Benno says he will provide all of the equipment needed. A great offer. Mine asks, isn't it part of the test to create their own equipment? To which Benno said it wouldn't be fair if they didn't have the right environment. Both viewpoints are valid, with Benno's being the fairer one. Benno then reveals the catch to this wonderful deal. He wants the recipe for the simple all-in-one shampoo. Mine then says he wants it instead of collateral, with the word collateral surprising Benno, because he didn't expect Mine to know that word. Even after Mine explains the word to Lutz, he looks confused, just blinking. Benno says that a recipe can't work as collateral though, so he will just buy it. Mine then clarifies the agreement by asking if the raw materials will also be covered by Benno, to which he says they will be. Benno then flexes his intel network by revealing he was already aware of Lutz talking to lumberers about trees with soft wood. After that, Mine asks how long his backing will last, and we get this diagram. Before their baptisms, the Gilberta Company will simply purchase the paper from them. Following their baptism, when they become apprentices, they will receive a salary along with 10% of the profits from paper sales being added to their pay. Whilst a good offer, Mine proposes that instead of the royalties, she and Lutz retain the rights to produce and sell the paper respectively. Benno then elaborates that she wants long-term job security rather than short-term profit, to which he applauds Mine for her ability to protect her interests. I would have missed it, but Mine noticing that the royalties are added onto their pay is likely what caused her to propose this, because without having the job, like she says, she wouldn't receive any royalties. Lutz is still stun-locked by the negotiations, but Benno then asks about the rights to the simple all-in-one shampoo. However, Mine says he can have it, probably because she doesn't think it's very valuable with how easy it is to make. With order forms now needing to be filled in, we are introduced to Mark, Benno's right-hand man. Mark then teaches Mine how to fill out an order form, whilst Lutz learns to read and write. Mark shows an interest in Mine doing mathematics without a calculator, much like Otto did. Lutz is glaring at Mine though, which causes her to ask if he's okay. Although he says he is, we can see that Mine looks almost doubtful about his response. I also want to point out the maths Mine is doing. We can only properly see one calculation, but it is correct, by the way. The purpose of these calculations is less clear to me, however. If I were to guess though, I would say that it's for measurements for the equipment she needs. The order form's now complete. Benno instructs Mark to get the contract magic. Given that this is the first time we've heard about magic since the first scene in Ferdinand's hidden room back in episode 1, which I'll remind you is set in the future, Mine gets excited, wondering if that makes this a fantasy world. Benno then tells us that only nobles possess mana, following with the trend of them having everything Mine wants. He then explains why contract magic is necessary in the first place, being used to prevent nobles from using their power to alter or cancel deals. With Benno informing us that the special ink and parchment are only given to those merchants who cater to the nobility, we really get a sense of how important this trade is. Mark then tells us that because the ink is so expensive, it is only used for deals that are viewed as being very profitable, which causes Mine to realise that she was scammed with how cheap she sold the simple all-in-one shampoo. And I just love Benno's smug face as he knows he's exploited a kid for profit. With the contract checked, the three of them sign, with Mine disliking having to seal it with her blood. It's so cool how the parchment lights up and burns away once all signatures are signed. On the way home, we can see that the sun is already setting, suggesting that they spent about half of their day there, and Mine says she was shocked to see him write his name perfectly the first time. Lutz coldly replies that he was taught to write it before, but when did this happen? It must have been off screen because I can't remember it happening before. We can see Lutz acting distant though, as his tone was harsh and now he's walking ahead of Mine, unlike how he usually walks side by side with her. Noticing the obvious shift in his demeanour, Mine asks what's wrong, to which he ignores her. A taste of her own medicine, I see. Lutz finally answers though, and asks if she is Mine, and with this confrontation, we reach the midpoint of the episode. Returning to the episode, Lutz continues his confrontation by asking Mine how she was able to have those conversations that he couldn't remotely understand. His doubts make a lot of sense too. It's strange how Mine, a sheltered child growing up, would know these complex business concepts and terms at the age of 6. Throughout the last half of the episode, we saw Lutz looking confused most of the time and only really speaking to agree after Mine had already done so herself. The difference in their behaviours and knowledge is far greater than what it should be, and Lutz recognises this. However, Lutz's attack crumbles when Mine asks him if she seems like someone else, to which he apologises and says it is weird. You can't help but feel bad for Lutz here, because although it is a weird thing to say, he's not wrong. The Mine in front of him isn't the same Mine he probably once knew. As the pair continue walking, Mine thinks that she messed up by being too eager. She also acknowledges that once they start making the paper, Lutz will definitely realise she isn't really Mine. We can see her fear building here of being found out, but she's on a set path where it's almost inevitable at this point. We now start a nightmare sequence, at least that's what I believe it is, although it's hard to tell until the very end. We can see Mine's family acting rather coldly towards her, and they all have such sad expressions on their faces. When I first watched this, I thought their behaviour was strange, but now that I'm pretty sure it's a nightmare, I believe it shows Mine's fear of isolation. This portrayal of her family is how Mine fears they will treat her if they find out she's a fake. Compared to the warm, loving environment she has grown used to, this one is cold and her family feels distant. When Mine goes outside to get water as Gunther asked her to, we see Lutz, Ralph and Faye asking who she is and demanding that she brings back the real Mine. It's with that where Mine starts panicking and asking for help. However, she's instead met with dozens of hands asking who she is. It's quite an eerie scene, but Mine awakens and Effa comes to check on her. Nice to see that the cobweb is still in the corner too. Mine claims she's fine now though, probably because there isn't really a way for her to explain her feelings to Effa. She can't just out herself as someone else. Mine informs us of her extreme solution, that if they ever find out she isn't Mine, she will let the fever consume her, essentially taking her own life. Before that though, she at least wants to make her paper so that she has no regrets. The next morning we meet Lutz again, and she says it's a bit awkward now. And I mean, of course it was going to be. It's difficult to come back from being called an imposter. Lutz, however, acts as though it never happened, saying good morning and that he can't go to Benno's today. This makes Mine realise that if she handles all business dealings on days when Lutz isn't there, she can minimise how suspicious he becomes. As Mine walks off, the camera focuses on Lutz. The poor guy basically got ignored again. No greeting, no little chat, just a got it. So he deserves some spotlight. But I think it's probably to show us that Lutz is still watching Mine, seeing if he has reason to be doubtful. Mine and Mark are now out to deliver order forms, and Mine asks for a workshop near the south gate where her and Lutz can work. It makes sense given the forest is very far from Benno's place, and they will need to go there quite often. But getting excited over seeing the lumberers, Mine collapses. When she wakes up, she is with Benno and Karina. Benno claims that he lost years of his life when he heard about her. This line is quite funny, but it also expresses how shocked and worried Benno was. Obviously, it's a scary thing anyway when someone collapses. However, Benno is under the assumption that Mine has the devouring, and so his fear could have been far worse, worrying that Mine died or is getting closer to death. After hearing the panic she caused, Mine apologizes and kowtows to show her sincerity. Much like with bowing her head earlier though, this just receives confusion as a result of the cultural dissonance. After making sure Mine is okay, she is sent home despite her readiness to work, and is told that she is forbidden from going there without Lutz. I see that strategy only lasted less than a day. With Mine bedridden once again though, we return to Benno, who is reaffirming his belief that Mine has the devouring to Otto. Here we receive some information about this illness, and we learn that it's a side effect of some commoners being born with mana, but not having the tools to control it, and so it grows and consumes them. Otto essentially functions as our messenger here, asking the questions we want to know, but he does also comment that Gunther will be destroyed. It's a nice little line which shows how close they are, that Otto immediately thinks of his feelings. Also, shout out to Benno. He is single-handedly carrying this plot device by revealing to us what this illness is slowly over time. The true hero. With Gunther giving a very stern warning to Mine about pushing herself, Lutz now finds out that Mine is banned from going to the Gilberta company without him, as Gunther tells him to take care of Mine. I love that Lutz laughs at this, both because he's feeling relieved, but also because it's just a funny thing to happen to someone. Lutz then explains his feelings to Mine, saying he was just upset that Mine was so capable without him. He was feeling useless. Despite Lutz apologizing though, we see he is still suspicious as he stares sternly at Mine like he's trying to read her, something Mine catches. Back at the Gilberta company, Benno tells Lutz that his job is a vital mission, and that he must take care of Mine. I love that as Benno asks Lutz about who is capable of his job. With each question, Mine shrinks away more and more. I'd probably do the same if I was being talked about, like part. However, Lutz determines that Mine could make it to the south gate today, if she walked slowly. We then find out that they have been given a workshop like Mine requested earlier, leading to her getting excited and ultimately told off. Lutz also displays his awareness of Mine and her thought process by stating that all of their warnings probably went straight through her, leaving her flustered. Mine then tells us that whilst she hadn't realised it at the time, on that day Lutz stopped calling her Mine. It's the type of thing that you don't really notice or pick up on, but it speaks volumes for Lutz's suspicion of Mine. He's so doubtful of her identity that he doesn't even want to address her by name. Chibi segment time. This time, Mine tells Ferdinand about how Lutz became highly valued as the mine supervisor from that day onward, and Ferdinand gives his full understanding. He also gives his empathy to Benno and everyone else for having to deal with Mine collapsing, leading Mine to change the subject to her finally making paper next episode, although Ferdinand's face says exactly how he feels. But with that, the episode ends. Thanks for watching and I hope you enjoyed. Please leave your thoughts below. Bye!